encouraged me to do some sculptures on paper, like prints. And these are some of those. I began to see each iron steam hole pattern as a different tribal relic. So I had several tribes. I had the GEs, I had the Black and Deckers, I had the Sunbeams, I had the Proctors, So these pieces show that kind of thing. I think, and one of them actually, and these shields, each shield is named after one of the brands, the domestic shields. The domestic shields are my first show in New York, and they were inspired by the Zulu shields. And they were made outdoors. Like some of the sculptures are made indoors using a hot plate, where I take the iron apart and I just use the sole plate of the iron and put it on a kitchen like hot plate to heat it up. But with this piece, I worked, again, taking a cue from the homeless people because they were all around in the city of Newark at that time. I just got a can and filled it with wood and paper and started a huge fire and used it. The irons became like branding irons. The legs that are on each of these iron boards were actually the handles that I used to attach to the irons to put in the fire, so they would become charred as well. The iron boards are actually cut out of wood, so they're not real iron boards. I got mattress padding from a place down the street who was excited about me being an artist. So all these are padded ironing boards.
This is in the collection of the Dallas Museum of Art, I believe.
Right.
And now ironing boards.
Yeah, this might be the first piece that involved real ironing boards as opposed to ironing boards cut out of wood. And I was looking through a book of symbols from around the world and symbols from Africa. And this symbol of kind of a jack existed and inspired me to make this piece. I like pieces like this because they're almost like ships. You can lift up one side like a door and you can get right in and you can fly across the universe. So I like that feeling. Again, I wanted to really, I had imagined that if the civilization was to completely fall apart and a new civilization began and they were finding things to figure out what was before them, I wanted them to find these pieces and think there was a society here where the people worship the iron. So
it's interesting because John McCracken, and I know you were admiring the beautiful red John McCracken in the gallery, he said the same thing, that he wanted those plinths, those planks that lean against the wall to seem like something that an alien might have made and left behind.
Yeah, I mean, I had a whole concept. Like when I was doing the metal, I thought of that as high-tech primitive art, weaving galvanized steel. But when I started doing the irons, I called it archaeological ethnographic Dada. So I was really unearthing a civilization and just making all the stuff to support that idea. This piece is definitely unique in my body of work.
Very much so.
And
tell us about it.
This is tar and feather shotguns. And this just has to do with growing up black in America.
What inspired this, since it's such a departure from where you were going with the other work?
I have received lots of inspiration from Malcolm X. I worked at a library as a kid, in high school anyway, 14, 15-year-old kid. So I have every Malcolm X speech. I have to say, and I know this is going to be recorded, maybe I shouldn't say. But as a 14-year-old kid working in the library, I actually stole the record. So it's a 2-record set of the speeches of Malcolm X. I don't know if they replaced it or not. They probably have it on CD by now. But I was so moved by it as a kid that I had to have it. So, and I still have it today. Plus, the books. So I've made lots of work based on excerpts from his speeches. And that's why it has an X in the middle. And the tar and featherness is just an experience that a lot of people had.
Well, it also makes me think of the Confederate flag.
Yes, and I wasn't thinking of the Confederate flag at all. But just going to Pennsylvania, getting those shotguns was an experience. And then going to my local chicken shop and buying the feathers instead of the chicken was an experience as well.
Do you want? I know that you return to that theme in a later work that we'll see, but there was a famous quotation. You want to tell us that?
Chickens come home to roost.
Yeah.
Yeah, from Malcolm X's speech. When John Kennedy was assassinated, the news media, of course, they go to Malcolm X and they say, Mr. X, what do you think of the assassination of the American president? And Malcolm says, I think it's a case of chickens coming home to roost. So, and I assume that you all know what that means. Chickens, they live like on Main Street, but you open your gate, they go out, run around the town, but they always come back home to lay their eggs. So that was my view on terrorism in America, and that's how it evolved in my awareness.
And this one also a very unique work.
Yes, I like making mechanical things. I've made probably in the past 25 years only 3 or 4 of them. But this is a chance to do wordplay again. So it's a random selection machine for race. So it's a slot machine, and on the front of the machine, there are photographs of people of different races. And in the wheel, there's an R wheel that contains race words related with R, and it goes right across to A, C, and E. So you can get your combinations. You can be a Russian, African, Caucasian, Ethiopian, or something like that. Whatever RACE blends, and it actually works.
So would you put money in the machine, or how
no?
would it
Just
work?
a one-arm band. You just pull.
Oh, you just
crank,
pull it in. Okay.
And they spin around and they stop.
That's what we now call participatory art.
Yes. It's in a collection in Holland. Mm-hmm. But I love making these kind of things. This has evolved. Most recently, I've made a zoetrope, which is probably my most recent not participatory, but at least mechanical project. Hmm. And I'm working on another zoetrope now for a show next year. So I enjoy that. This is interesting because this was shown with the blackboards that you have here.
That we're going to see, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in the gallery and I have all these blackboards, but I said, man, I really love the way that 3D and 2D look together. I got to do something else in this space. And this was in Soho, so I go out on the street of Soho and I look around and I find these windows. So I bring them into the gallery and I make several houses out of the windows, and I go back around and find some chairs, all of the streets of New York, and make these pieces. And this is just it's not quite a cliche, but the expression that people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Mm. So that tied it into the American blackboards a lot.
Which we'll see in a second, yeah. And here it is. Yes. And in fact, this work is currently hanging in the Contemporary Galleries upstairs. If those of you haven't seen it yet, please take a look after the conversation. Yeah. And we've almost met our goal, and we think this is soon going to be in the SAMA collections. We're very excited about that.
That'd be great. I wish they would all clap.
Yes. A very important acquisition. So thank you to those who are making this possible for us. But anyway, it is a very powerful piece. You did 8 of these.
Right.
This is number 6 in this series. And tell us a little bit about
this. This was my desire
project.
to write, because I had so many sculptural obligations. But I guess they would be called backronyms, because I start with the word and then I just take the letters from the word and create a list of words. So I spent several hours making acronyms based on the word America. I did that either by sitting in front of the TV news and writing words in each story. So if the newscaster is saying, today on the campaign trail, I'd write C, campaign, I'd write that word down. And as whatever word fit into America, I would write it down. And then I would go back and try to make sense and tell the same story that they were telling without all the prepositions and things like that. I did the same thing with the New York Times and the Village Voice with a yellow highlighter. And I have files and files of these wordplay things. They're on blackboards because I learned about America in school as a student on a blackboard, so that's why they have that look. But this was don't know if this preceded race or came after race, but I've done the same thing with several words, including love and money, America, stimulus, art, and God.
And for those who haven't sort of deciphered it all yet, when you read horizontally across each row,
Right.
you'll find some very potent
Right, and there's one that I
insightful
have
phrases.
memorized. It's not on this board, and it's not from the news, but once you get locked into this process, this pattern, you hear it all the time. So one that I remember, even though this was like almost 10 years ago, was Adam makes Eve regret ingesting contaminated apples. So it's one of my favorites.
It is. So anyway, we encourage everyone to go upstairs if they haven't yet, and spend some time with this piece. It's filled with exciting and interesting content, and it's provocative, and it's thoughtful, and it's what great art should be. So we're very proud to have it here. And then this was a related body of work.
Right. I realized the flag had the right number of stripes on it, where I can actually do the same thing on the flags. I think the blackboards are more successful, but I think I did maybe
Three flags?
3 or 4 flags.
And I had the privilege of showing one in a show on the American flag back in the mid-'90s.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, now this, you've done a lot of work with the ladies' high heel shoes.
Right. And how did it start? It started with my son, who did not wear high heels, but he wore sneakers. And at about the age of 8 or 9, he decided to give me all of his sneakers to make something. And that was only maybe 8 or 9 pair of sneakers. So it inspired me to go buy more sneakers so I could really do something amazing. I actually wanted to make a bodysuit, a one-piece bodysuit with sneakers tied onto it from the cloth side, so the soles were sticking out and they would bounce when you walk around. That was my concept. So I go to a thrift store to buy sneakers, and they don't have many sneakers, but they have lots of high heels. So I bought the high heels instead. And my first idea was to make a big box. Because of the wordplay addiction, I wanted to make a shoe box. But as I moved through that process, it started to become a chair. And this is the chair.
Was this the first one then with the high heels?
This was the first with the high heels, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, the news at the time was Ferdinand Marcos and his wife Imelda.
Oh, Imelda Marcos, yes.
So that's why it's made in the Philippines.
For those who don't remember or too young to remember, she had the biggest collection of high heel shoes.
Right, but I have more than her, I'm sure.
Now you do, yeah.
I mean, I've had millions of shoes. And a lot of these shoes are most of these shoes are made in other countries. There may be some actually made in the Philippines.
And where do you get all these shoes?
Well, in this piece, they came from the Salvation Army thrift store in Newark, New Jersey. In '93, I only made about 5 pieces out of shoes, and they all came from the Salvation thrift in Newark.
And
But
today,
in
where do you get the
2005, I was a fellow at the University of Georgia, and just like at Student Museum in Harlem, I didn't want to take all of my stuff with me. So I said, what could I get locally here? And I said, hey, I can go to a thrift store and get high heel shoes. So I struck a deal at Potter's House thrift store in Athens, Georgia. I contacted them in September, and in January, they had millions of shoes for me. And I bought them all at 50 cents a pound.
Wow.
Yeah. For the chair, this is not such a great slide here, but for the chair and furniture pieces, I removed the heels from the shoe. So I have a collection of just the heel, the spike heel, or various kinds of heels that come on women's shoes. And I see each one as like a brushstroke, because I'm a big fan of Impressionism and Pointillism. So I began to attach those to surface just to make random compositions. So this is one of those. But you really can't appreciate it from this particular slide here.
And it's the best I could find online. So
I understand.
So anyway. And then this seems to be a very popular work of yours.
Right. I have two works of art, and this is one of them where I feel that not the book that you suggested, but any book that's maybe when I've moved on in life, that's about me, this will be an important piece in that book, because this piece explains the whole iron thing for me. You know, that the title suggests the stowage, suggests the slavery, but the iron board is the slave ship, and the various brands of irons are all around it, and each one is to represent a tribe that was stowed on the ship. Also, I didn't go to graduate school, but if I did, this would have been my thesis piece, because when this piece was made, suddenly everybody was going crazy. This was the first piece of mine acquired by the Museum of Modern Art. They were so excited about it, they gave me a one-person show a couple years later. And so it's an important piece. It's also, it was the first print that I made as a professional artist that was not based on a photograph or digitized image. So now that you know I'm deep in an obsession with irons, so I wanted to see them in different ways. So
And this is the same work or two works?
that's the same piece.
Same piece, yeah.
And Luba is the name of a group of people or a so-called tribe in West Africa. And I wanted to make irons that look like various cultural groups or tribes. And so this has the aesthetic of the Luba. It also was inspired by the fact that I moved out of Newark in 1994 to a part of New Jersey that's collectively called Lakelands, New Jersey. My town is called Mine Hill. So because it's lakeland, a lot of my neighbors have boats. And in that part of New Jersey, there are not a lot of thrift stores like there are in Newark, the big city. There are antique stores. But there are also a lot of boat storage yards that have unclaimed boats. I call like boat graveyards. So I noticed right away that the boat looked just like the steam iron. So that led me to make big irons. Some actually made from boats. Some like they're made from scratch. Yeah, and again, same story here. This is the Chihuahua, and the Chihuahua has the aesthetic that you find among the Chihuahua people in West Africa. This double-headed gas snake, should I just talk about it? Or should I wait for a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm so used to doing PowerPoint by myself and like responding to every image.
You're doing a great job.
But, you know, the iron work was personal mythology. But there's a war going on. There's the Gulf War. The first one of George won. So I felt that I needed to respond to what was going on in the world and not just be so in my own head. And that led to the gas snakes. So for me, George Bush Sr., Saddam Hussein, they were gas snakes. And that led to this piece here. This is the other piece that I think would be important in a book about Willie Cole, the Iron Years. You know?
The Iron Age.
The Iron Age, right. So this is man's spirit mask. The man is partly me. It's one side of my face flipped to make a whole face, because my graphic design training has made me addicted to symmetry. And I want to project the steam holes as scarification, so my scarification, that image comes from the iron. From the iron that's in the middle. The spirit is the scorch. As I said earlier, the evidence of the power is in the scorch, not in the physical iron itself. And the image on my right here is the iron as a woodblock print.
And a shift of gears here for this installation.
Right. It's because I just read the panel you have out there under my trance dance. I was glad to read that because I still feel that way today. So despite the obvious subject matter, this work for me really is about the energy. And this piece is evidence of that because I was in Wisconsin where there are lots of cows and working as an artist in resident at the cola factory where they make toilets and sinks. So these pieces are all made from toilets that have been cut in half. And once I didn't know it would be a cow until I cut it. And I thought they looked just like cows, So I painted the cow patterns on them. And that's how they became two-faced bullshitters, because the backside has another cow face on it too. I'm actually showing that piece currently in New Jersey at a place called Grounds for Sculpture.
Now this is kind of a much more literal.
Right, and this was made at the same time as the cows. So Kohler offers artists a chance to work with ceramics or with metal cast or fiberglass. So I did this in their iron shop to cast these guns. And I have to say, I probably made guns because I grew up with guns. My dad, he was not a hunter, but he was definitely armed. And even to this day, he has lots of guns and rifles. So as a little kid, I would clean his gun for him. I would rub bluing on it and all kinds of things like that. So I've never owned one myself, but when I thought of a chance to make something in an iron shop, I thought of making big guns. So that's how it came about. This is also evidence of the whole energy thing, because...
Was this also at Kohler?
This was at Kohler
Yeah.
also. These are made from toilet parts also.
Yes.
So the artist studio was kind of a partition area in the warehouse. And the warehouse was one half of the factory. There were no walls between the factory and the warehouse, but just partitioned around where the artists were working. There were 3 of us. For me, walking through a warehouse with toilets stacked 20 feet high, brilliant white, I felt like I was in India. They made me think of temples. So as a result, not consciously, but just through play, these sculptures were created. And I don't know if you can see it in these images here, maybe the one with the shorter legs you can, but they all were like Ganesh, who is a Hindu god, the elephant-headed son of Shiva, the remover of obstacles. And I never realized that obstacles and removal is toilet-related before this conversation. Just occurred to me. But that's how they came about.
And now, I mean, extremely figurative work here, unexpected.
Right.
How did this happen?
Let's see. I'll start with the one. Suicide version is the easiest one to talk about, I would say. After 9/11, New York Magazine, Time, they all had pictures of bin Laden and his whole crew sitting in caves. Now, I grew up in a Baptist church. My great-grandfather was a minister. Lots of my uncles are ministers. Seeing these illustrations in the Bible of Jesus and all his crew sitting in the caves and talking. And when I saw the bin Laden photo, it reminded me of the images I grew up with of Jesus. Not so much that bin Laden was Jesus, don't get me wrong, but the fact that this was a man with a group of people photographed in the image that I had grown up believing was a holy image. Men with long beards dressed in robes sitting on the ground. So I tried to then make a parallel between the images of Christ and the images of bin Laden. So I said, so bin Laden's mother, what would she have done? What would, if Christ was in that time of terrorism, what would Mary have done? And I said, well, Mary would be a suicide virgin. She would put on a explosive vest and she would walk into some Roman office and she would just destroy it that way. So this one has a vest made out of firecrackers. And this is the suicide virgin. The other piece...
Well, and then, when you think about it, to me, I get the idea here that, you can't judge a person by their clothing, in other words. And
yeah, that's
what's
true.
on the
That's true.
outside
That's
does
true.
not really tell us what's on the
That's
inside.
true.
And when you
Right.
think of suicide bombers, I mean, people don't know they're about to bomb them
Right.
because they don't look like the person
And
who would do that.
Another fact that is relevant today is that these people, Palestine, that was, they hung out in that area, that same part of the world where all the trouble is, where all the bombing is going on, where all the terrorism supposedly originated.
And the other figure, I guess, is a reference to the Sambo.
No,
No,
not
it's
the
not.
Sambo.
Not the Sambo.
The Elegba is a Ifa or Yoruba or West African deity He is the guy at the crossroads. He's also called the presenter of choices. That means that you confront Elegba each morning when you go to your closet and you want to decide what to wear. So Elegba doesn't make the decision for you, but he presents the choices.